and welcome. Today I've got an interesting question for you once again. Would you fall in love with someone you are not attracted to? You know how important it is, right? When you are attracted to someone or something, what happens? You begin to desire that person or thing, don't you? What happens next? You keep thinking about that person or thing. It could be a person, but it could also be like, a car you want to buy or a house or something, it could be something that you really are drawn to, a piece of technology. I don't know what it is for you. But that thing just keeps popping up in your mind. And we've all experienced this. In fact, I'd go so far as to say if there was no attraction, there would be no desire. And if there was no desire, then no one would look for a life partner or as something to buy. The economies of our world would collapse and we'd find ourselves pretty sterile beings kind of just existing. That is why attraction is so vital for our existence. And yet, some people are drawn to certain things and some are not. People are drawn to different sports and music and food and religions, and it's the whole spectrum, everything. People like something different. They want something new. They want something that's going to excite them more. But are there some things that are universal? Some things that attract everyone? Let's see. Would you be attracted to someone who has incredible beauty? Now, beauty standards might differ from one place to another, and ideas of beauty might differ. But whatever you think of as beautiful, would you be drawn to someone who is incredibly beautiful? Okay. How about fame? Would you be drawn to someone who's famous or powerful or wealthy or strong or knowledgeable? How about someone who's detached, renounced, nothing bothers them? These 6 qualities are considered to be universally attractive, and the more someone has them, the more attractive that person is. In the Vedas, in Sanathana Dharma, in the ancient traditions that come from India, the definition of God or the Supreme Being is that being who is all attractive, that being who has all knowledge, knows everything, all beauty, supremely beautiful to everyone, all fame, known by everyone, by different names maybe, but all fame, all strength, all power, all wealth, owns everything. Everything belongs to this being, not to us. And he's at the same time detached from it all. The Sanskrit word for attraction is akarshit. And the all-attractive one is therefore known as Krishna. It derives from that word akarshit. So why does he appear in this world? To attract us. And why does he perform all the pastimes which we keep hearing about, or we've been hearing about in the Bhagavatam for some time now? To attract us. To attract our mind and senses, which are entangled in worldly pleasures, towards him. You see, if I told you to sit and meditate for a few hours every day, you might get bored. Not everyone can do it. People go to a church or a temple or mosque once a week at best. Go in for a little bit, get out as soon as they can. But Krishna says in the Gita, he says, always think of me, become my devotee. Surely you will come to me. How can we who are so lost in worldly affairs always think about God? The answer is here, in front of us, right now, in one word, Leela. The delightful, ever-fresh stories of his pastimes. In fact, he comes to perform these pastimes just to attract us, just to let us know how exciting he is and his world is. So let's find out more about that, and I'll see you in just a moment. So we've been talking about Krishna after he was born. And in this phase of the Bhagavatam, we're learning about a particular kind of love. See, there's different kinds of love. Divine love has 5 different parts. The first of which is where it's passive. You just enjoy adoring your beloved. It's passive. You're not doing anything. It's like, boy looking at a girl and just, infatuated, just absolutely unable to get his eyes off of her. Can't get my eyes off of you. Remember that song? I don't know if you're old enough to remember that. But yeah, that kind of fascination. And then there's another kind, which is where you want to serve the person who you love. It's just, you want to serve them, you want to care for them, you want to do things for them. And then there is parental love. And this is the one we're focusing on in the Bhagavatam right now. You know how intense parental love can be. A parent, when their baby is born, can think of nothing else. Well, the baby completely absorbs their mind and their attention and everything. And then as they get older, again, it's so hard. You're always drawn to your children and you can't help but think about them. And so parental love is a very powerful force. See, a lot of people conceive of God as their father. But father, we rebel against our father so much, right? Or our mother. And we, may not always think about them. And we want things from them. We have expectations and needs that we look to them for. And if those expectations are not met, we might say, I don't care, right? And so a lot of people go to God and they want this and that and the other. And when their needs are not met, they say, there's no God. Who cares? I'll just go and pay my due diligence just so I get saved at the end of my life. But, I got other things to do. Certainly they're not thinking all the time about God. No, not going to happen like that. But if you were the parent of God, that'd be a whole different story. And that's what we're going to learn about more here. There is also the friend. When you've got a good friend, a best friend, a buddy, then there's another very special relationship. And then, of course, there's the lover. So these 5 kinds of relationships we're going to see in the pastimes of Krishna. Today we're focusing on the parental one. He's still a baby. He's just been crawling and captivating everyone's heart. And even not just his mother, but also the other people in the village come over to their house and just want to hang out with the baby, as often happens when you have a baby. People want to come around and they want to just play with the baby. And they're fascinated with the things that the baby does. So it is with Krishna, right? So one day, Mother Yashoda, that's his mother, saw that all the maidservants in her home were busy. And so she personally began to churn the yogurt. Now, I didn't know this, but I always thought that butter was made by churning cream. But apparently, it's equally made by churning yogurt. In the West, it's mostly cream that they will churn, but in India and places, they would also churn yogurt. And so that's what they're describing here. While churning the yogurt to form butter, she was remembering the childish pastimes of Krishna. And she was enjoying making up songs and singing to herself. There she was, dressed in a saffron yellow sari with a belt tied around her hips, and she was pulling the churning rope, laboring considerably. And her bangles and earrings were moving and vibrating, and her whole body was shaking. Because of her intense love for her child, her breasts were wet with milk. Her face, with its very beautiful eyebrows, was wet with perspiration, and flowers were falling from her hair. So if you get that picture, let me see if I can enhance it for you a little. Now, Krishna was probably smaller than this, but this is how the artist has depicted him right now in this picture, so we'll just play with that. And this is the image where she's churning, and you can see that there's a rope She's pulling the rope on either side. It's different depictions of that. So think of what it's like if you had with you the Supreme Being, the all-attractive one, the most attractive being of all, there by your side. And you were feeling this immense love. What would it be like for you? So here is Yashoda pulling on the rope and feeling all while she's churning things, but she can't stop thinking about him. Now, Krishna he was a baby, right? Few months old, maybe, I don't know exactly, but he wanted to have some milk, some breast milk. And so he came before her, kind of pulling and getting her attention. And he even caught hold of the churning rod to prevent her from churning. He was a little demanding about his needs. And at that point, Yashoda embraced him. She understood what he wanted. She sat him down on her lap and began to look upon his face with great love and affection. Now, while she was holding him and feeding him, suddenly she noticed that the milk pan on the oven was boiling over. And so she immediately left her son to take care of the overflowing milk. But baby Krishna had not finished feeding and he became very angry. So biting his reddish lips and his teeth, baby Krishna, with false tears in his eyes, picked up a stone and threw it at an earthen pot which was filled with yogurt. The pot that his mother had been churning, right? And it broke. Earthen pots, not that strong. It's not like plastic or metal. It broke. And then he crawled away from there and he entered another room and began to eat the freshly churned butter that his mother had kept in a solitary place. She'd hidden it somewhere, but he went there and got hold of it. So Mother Yashoda was meanwhile taking down the hot milk from the stove, and she returned to the churning spot, and then she saw the container of yogurt was broken and that Krishna was not present. She understood this was his work. He had done this. At that time, Krishna was sitting in a different room on an upside-down wooden mortar, so wooden grinding mortar, and he was taking the butter out of the pot that was there, and he was feeding it. Well, he was eating it himself, and he was feeding it to the monkeys. And because he knew his mother would be upset, he was looking all around with great anxiety, suspecting that she might come in any moment and chastise him. Have you ever been mischievous like that? Do you know what it's like to be so playful, so fun-loving, so alive, so vibrant? These days, we go to therapy, and then in therapy, we look at how can we reawaken our inner child. But here we see that inner child that we are, that we were when we were born and we were young. That originates from the original model, and that model is the divine itself, or God. In fact, everything we are, at our true nature, everything we are, comes from God. Because we have a relationship of love with God, we look for love in everyone. Not in everyone, no, that's if you're a highly evolved person. But we look for someone to love. And we try to find that one person, and we think, oh my God, I've got to find that one. But what if that one, because we're never quite satisfied with the one that we've got, right? There's always something we want that is not being met. Our needs, our expectations, our desires are never quite met. But what if the one we're looking for is actually the source of all, that divine being? And here we're getting to see what he's like. Now, I want you to try to really step into this world and imagine yourself there. Because this is contemplation. This is the most profound kind of contemplation you're going to find. And that the very act of listening to these pastimes is as divinely spiritual as chanting a mantra, sitting in meditation. It's as powerful, maybe even more powerful, this contemplation on Leela, on the pastimes of the divine of God. All right, so here is Krishna looking here and there. He knows he's doing something naughty. He knows that his mom is going to get mad. He's feeding the monkeys the butter that his mom took so much time to churn. There were other maidservants and other people around also who'd been working on, churning the butter, because they were a dairy community. So they milked the cows by hand, and they churned the yogurt, they made it into yogurt, and they churned that yogurt, made it into butter, and then they sold all that. Krishna's family, I heard, had a few 100,000 cows. They weren't poor. His father was the king of the cowherd people. And yet, here he was, stealing butter. He's known as the butter thief. All right, so he's feeding the monkeys and is looking all around with anxiety, and his mother comes up from behind and catches hold of him. Now, she has brought a stick in her hand. This is the supreme being, the Lord of everything. And his mother has a stick in her hand, and she's going to beat him. So as soon as Krishna saw her, he very quickly got down from the top of the mortar, the grinding mortar that he was sitting on, and began to flee as if very much afraid. And the Bhagavatam says, great yogis try to capture him by meditation. They meditate on the Lord within the heart. They meditate on that space within themselves and desire to merge into the effulgence of God, into the light. And despite great austerities and penances, they fail to reach him. But Mother Yashoda, thinking that the Supreme Being was her son, went chasing after him, holding her stick in her hand. While following Krishna, Mother Yashoda, her thin waist overburdened by heavy breasts, had to move slowly because she was still breastfeeding. Her hair became loose and the flowers in her hair kept falling. Finally, she caught him. When he was caught by Mother Yashoda, Krishna became very afraid. Again, keep in mind, he has no reason to be afraid. He is the creator of everything. He is the Lord of all creation. He showed even Yashoda in the previous episode we saw, where he showed her the entire universe within his mouth. The entire universe, including her sitting there watching. And then he made her forget it all. So here he was, playing this role, being very much afraid. And he admitted to being an offender. He said, yes, I did it. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. He began crying, and his tears mixed with they put black eyeliner around the eyes of children in India when they're babies. And so his tears mixed with that black eyeliner around his eyes started, smudging all over. And then he rubbed his eyes with his hands and began to smudge even further. It was all over his face. And Yashoda, catching her beautiful son by the hand, mildly began to chastise him. Let's take a look at some pictures again. There's Krishna eating that butter. Look at the eyeliner around his eyes. Look at the details with which she's dressed him. And he's got that classic peacock feather on his head. That's his sort of trademark. This one's not that clear, but that's him feeding the butter to the monkeys. And here's Yashoda chasing him with a stick in her hand, nothing less. And now she begins to try to tie him up. Yashoda was always overwhelmed by intense love for Krishna. She had no idea who he was or how powerful he was. When she saw that her son had become excessively afraid, she threw the stick away. Okay, he's scared of the stick, I'm going to throw it away. And then she started to bind him to a large wooden mortar that was around. You have mortar and pestle, so large wooden mortar. She tried to tie him to that with some rope, so he would not commit any further activities, and she could get on with her household chores. And everybody else was busy, so she didn't have any help at that time. So Krishna, the supreme personality of Godhead, who has no beginning and no end, no exterior and no interior, no front and no rear. In other words, who is all-pervading, who is not under the influence of time, for whom there is no difference between past, present, and future, who exists in his transcendental form. So he'd come in his transcendental form, a spiritual form, not made of blood and bones and flesh, but a spiritual, transcendental form. He who is the absolute, beyond relativity, who is free from distinctions between cause and effect, although he is the cause and effect of everything, that unmanifest had become manifest and had now appeared as a human child, appearing to be a human child, and in the home of Yashoda and Nanda. And Yashoda, considering him to be her own ordinary child, was attempting to bind him to a wooden mortar with a rope. When Mother Yashoda was trying to bind Krishna, she noticed the binding rope was short. So she tied it all around him, and yet it was short by a distance of a width of 2 fingers. Just that much. She just couldn't, tie the last bit. So she brought another rope and tried to make it bigger, and then wrapped it again around him. And again, it was 2 fingers short. She couldn't tie the knot. She got some more rope until she finally tied up all the ropes in the house, and they were still 2 fingers short, and she just could not tie him up. See, he has his own way. He has his own way of doing things. Yashoda joined whatever she was able to find and kept on failing. Her friends, the other ladies around, the elderly gopis from the neighborhood, were looking on and smiling as they enjoyed the fun. Mother Yashoda, although struggling, was also smiling. And all of them were struck with wonder. Because of Yashoda's hard labor, her whole body became covered with perspiration. When baby Krishna saw his mother thus fatigued, he became merciful and allowed himself to be bound. He who cannot be bound by anyone was bound by his mother's love. That's the point. The narrator of the Bhagavatam, Shukdev, says, this entire universe with its great exalted demigods like Shiva, Brahma, and Indra is under the control of the Supreme Godhead Krishna. That Supreme Lord of everyone has one transcendental attribute. He comes under the control of his devotees. In other words, he is controlled by love. He who controls everything is controlled by love. This is the secret. And this was exhibited by Krishna in this pastime. Neither Brahma nor Shiva nor even Lakshmi, his consort and better half, can obtain from Krishna such mercy as was received by Mother Yashoda. So think of that, the quality, the power of love. Now, this love is very different than the love of this world. In this world, we love someone, but when that person doesn't meet our expectations, when that person doesn't meet our needs, when that person, we get disappointed. We feel betrayed, we feel let down, we feel, like this isn't working, this isn't right for me. But true love doesn't work like that. This that we're talking about here is prema. Prema is very different than what we call love in this world. The love of this world has certain expectations and needs. I'm not saying we're without expectations and needs. We all have them. And therefore, when we love as we are with our expectations and needs. But pure love does not have any expectation or need. For example, I think we'll take it up in the time when we talk about the romantic love of Krishna and the gopis and all of them. And then how when he leaves, they're not so worried that he's left. They're only concerned, is he happy? His mother is also only concerned about one thing, is he happy? But right now she's got her, motherly stuff to be done, so she's going to be a little tough. So now, the Supreme Being Krishna, the son of Mother Yashoda, is accessible to devotees who are engaged in spontaneous loving service, but he is not accessible. So, if you want to access him, the only way you can access him is through loving service. But he is not accessible to to those who are jnanis, in other words, those who are intellectuals, mental speculators, or those who are striving for self-realization by severe austerities and penances. You can't know him like that. You can't know him through all your hard work and all your struggle. The only way he reveals himself is when there is love. All right, so coming back to the story. After binding Krishna, tying him to that wooden grinding mortar, Yashoda once again got busy with household affairs. So let's get back to our pictures for a second here. She is trying to tie him up. This one's an adorable picture. He's got that look on his face. You're going to tie me up? Really? Are you going to do that to me? Look at those eyes. I mean, could you tie him up? No. All right, so you see that big grinding mortar in the back? She's tied him up to that. Now what happens? So she got busy, the mother got busy with her household affairs, and baby Krishna just sat there for a bit, and then he noticed these two trees. They were twin trees. I'm not sure what the equivalent is in today's time. They call them Yamala Arjun trees. Now, Krishna knew the inside story of these two trees. In a former millennium, these two had been the sons of the Deva, the demigod Kuber, the treasure of all the demigods. He was very powerful, very wealthy. And in that birth, these two sons, who were now known as Nala Kuvera and Manigriva, were extremely opulent and fortunate. But because of pride and false prestige, they did not care about anyone. And that is why the sage Narad had cursed them to become trees. There's a bit of a story behind that, so let's go into the backstory. So the king Parikshit, who's hearing this whole narrative, is asking, well, what happened? How? Why were they cursed by the sage? And what did they do that was so abominable that the sage Narad became angry at them? So Shukdev replies, he says, the two sons of Kuver had been elevated to the point where they could actually go and meet with Shiva. That's a pretty high level. Not many people get to have the association, the darshan of Shiva. But they were able to, and they were very proud of the fact. And they were able to wander all over the gardens of Kailash Hill, which is where Shiva lives, on the bank of the Mandakini River. Taking advantage of this, they used to sometimes go there and bring along, you know how youngsters are, teenagers, and they bring along their alcohol. So they brought this alcohol, this liquor called Varuni. And they would come there accompanied by women. Together, they would all be singing and wandering in that beautiful garden of flowers, their eyes rolling in intoxication. Within the waters of that Mandakini river, it was filled with lotus flowers. And the two sons of Kuver would enjoy the company of young girls, just like two male elephants enjoying in the water with female elephants. One day, the great saint Narad appeared there by chance. Seeing them intoxicated, he could understand the situation. The young girls, on seeing the sage, because when you have someone very saintly come along, he's renounced, he's celibate, you go do the proper decorum thing. So the young girls, although they were naked, they quickly got out and covered their bodies with their garments. But the two sons of Kuver did not do so. Instead, they stayed there in the water naked. Seeing the two sons of Kuver naked and intoxicated by not just in physicality, but also by opulence and false prestige, Narad, in order to show them special mercy, gave them a special curse. Narad said, among all the attractions of material enjoyment, the attraction of riches bewilders one's intelligence more than having a beautiful body, more than taking birth in an aristocratic family or being learned. When one is uneducated but falsely arrogant due to wealth, he uses his wealth in enjoying wine, women, and gambling. Unable to control their senses, such rascals who are foolish, falsely proud, think they will never grow old or die. They kill poor animals without mercy. Sometimes they kill animals merely to enjoy sport, for amusement. And this is a big deal. People think, oh, the animals are there for our enjoyment, or the animals don't have any souls. This is not true. Nothing can grow or move or have life within it unless there's a soul, whether that's a plant or a tree or an animal. The same soul which is in that animal body may have once been in a human body. The soul which is in the human body may one day be in an animal body. Now you say, oh, that's not possible. Why not? Right? If you live like a pig, maybe you should be a pig. I don't know. Some people are like that. Some people are more like rabbits. And maybe they should be rabbits. They just enjoy having sex all day long and producing babies or whatever else they do. I don't know. So there's all kinds of animalistic traits that people have, and they'd be better off being animals. Human life, as it says in the Bhagavatam, is meant for spiritual growth. It's meant for spiritual evolution. It's not meant to be wasted simply in sensual enjoyment. Not that we are able to be free of sensual enjoyment altogether, but we must minimize. Not that when we eat a tree, or rather, not we don't eat trees, we eat vegetables and fruits. Not that sometimes we may be killing plants. This is true also. But we want to minimize the harm that we do. We want to minimize the suffering that we create in this world as much as possible. So we want to take that form of life which experiences has the least level of consciousness and therefore experiences the least level of pain. That is why we eat more vegetables and fruits rather than eating animals and fish. But if one eats, and it's understandable, if you were stuck in a desert or in snow-capped mountains and there was nothing else around, then you eat what you can. But tell me, what is the difference between us and any other animal? We have a heart, they have a heart. We have skin, they have skin. We have hair growing on our body and they do too. And yet somehow we don't eat our dogs and cats or other humans, but we eat cows and, other creatures, deer. And it's quite sad, because if you really were to stop and look at it, look into the eyes of that creature, you'd know it has feelings, it has attachments, it's got its family, it's got its, I see them all the time now in the backyard. We see deer running around with their family and they stick together in a tribe. They're social creatures. And they support each other. And they're scared of these humans who might kill them for sport. But that's us humans. We just don't want to look beyond what is convenient or what is socially acceptable. But we need to think. We need to become more sensitive. We need to become more aware. All right, getting back to the story. While living, one may be proud of one's body, thinking of oneself a very big person, a minister, a president, or even a demigod, a deva. But whatever one may be, after death, this body will turn either into worms, or if it's eaten up by some other creature, then it will, if a person dies, let's say in the wilderness, then some creature might eat it up, and then it'll be turned into stool. Or if it's burnt, then into ashes. If one kills poor animals to satisfy the temporary whims of his body, one does not realize that he will suffer in his next birth for such activities and experience the results of his karma or actions. While alive, does this body... So what the question now he's asking, this is Narad, the great sage, and sages tend to be thinkers, they tend to be philosophers, so he's posing some questions. While alive, does this body belong to your employer? Does it belong to yourself? Does it belong to your father or mother? Does it belong to the person who takes it away by force? Let's say someone kidnaps you. Or does it belong to the slave master who purchases it? Or to the sons who burn it in fire? Or if the body is not burned, does it belong to the animals that eat it? Among the many possible claimants, who is the rightful claimant to maintain? Who is the rightful claimant of this body? To maintain the body by any means, often by harm to others, is not good. This body is produced from nature And after annihilation, it merges back into the natural elements, right? From ashes to ashes, dust to dust. Isn't that how they say it? Therefore, it is the common property. This body is the common property of everyone. Only a foolish person would claim the body as their own, and while maintaining it, commits sinful activities such as killing animals just to satisfy his whims. So keep this in mind. We did not create this body. I did not create my body. My parents didn't create my body. They had sex, yes, but that doesn't mean they created the body. They didn't choose what kind of eyes, nose, mouth. No, all that happened by nature. Nature runs under the supervision of the Supreme Being or God. It's been set up as a machine that works automatically, but that doesn't mean it is independent. So, by nature, this body was produced, and to nature it will return. We need to be conscious of the fact that is true for all creatures. They all have a right to live, and they all have a right for existence, just as we do. So then he says, atheistic fools and rascals who are very proud of their wealth fail to see things as they are. Therefore, returning them to poverty is the proper medicine for their eyes so that they may see things as they are. At least a poverty-stricken person can realize how painful poverty is, and therefore he will not want to be in a painful condition like his own. So this is a really important point. So when people have a lot of wealth, they don't see things. They're enamored by their wealth. They think they've become so great. They're better than others. I'm not saying everybody's like that, but for a lot of people they are. They become arrogant. And sometimes the only way for them to get the wake-up call to just get it bashed into their head is for them to fall into a place of poverty. So usually what happens is your good karma is what brings about that condition where you have a lot of wealth. And then when that karma is spent, like if your bank account is spent, your karmic bank account is spent, then you go back again. And so that person may go back to being in poverty. And he says that poverty now is the proper medicine for their eyes so they may see things as they are. At least a poverty-stricken person can realize how painful poverty is and therefore will not want others to be in a painful condition like his own. So what he's talking about is the development of empathy. The whole reason that karma exists is really one thing, for empathy. So we may learn to empathize with the suffering of others. So we may not cause suffering to others because we realize, hey, I've been there. I've experienced that. Then he goes on to give another example. One whose body has been pricked by pins or thorns can understand the pain of others who are pin-pricked, who've also had that happen or who've been pricked by thorns. Realizing that this pain is the same for everyone, he does not want others to suffer in the same way. But one who has never been pricked by pins cannot understand this pain. So similarly, it happens with people who have got great fame or power or wealth or beauty or whatever. They sometimes forget that they, what it might be like for someone else, and they fail to empathize. A poverty-stricken man must automatically undergo austerities and penances because he does not have the wealth to possess anything. Thus his false prestige is vanquished. Always in need of food and shelter and clothing, he must be satisfied with what is obtained by the mercy of providence. Undergoing such compulsory austerities is good for him because this purifies him and completely frees him from false ego. So this is a whole different twist you're going to see. He's trying to show you how karmically poverty actually works to free a person from false ego. Now, it doesn't have to be that way. We can be freed of false ego while having everything in the world. We could be free from false ego and arrogance and pride, even though we might be living in a palace and might be multimillionaires. Absolutely possible. Often it doesn't happen that way, and often it takes some extreme measures to help us break that ego. So, while we may feel very compassionate for such a person, it is very important to understand that life is there. All the experiences of life are there to purify us, to bring us to our knees so we may understand who we are. We're not here in this world just to eat, drink, and be merry. We're not just here to accumulate wealth. We're not just here to stay beautiful forever. That's not going to happen. We are here so that we may understand, who am I as a soul? and get connected with that part of us. And through that part of us, begin to understand who is God. Because there's no real difference. Qualitatively, who we are and who God is in quality the same. Quantitatively, we are tiny. God is the everything. We are infinitesimal. The micro, organic particle, whatever. mm. Mm. And he says, saintly persons may freely associate with those who are poverty-stricken, but not with those who are rich. A poverty-stricken man, by association with saintly persons, very soon becomes uninterested in material desires, and the impurities within his heart are cleansed away. We see this in a country like India a lot, that people who are poor more easily turn to God. And we see very often that the well-educated, English-speaking, rich and so on, tend to ignore all these teachings. And you'll see this in South America as well, and you'll see this all over the world. As long as you don't have a communist dictator like you have in China, wherever there is poverty, you'll see people turning towards God. Why? Because that condition of life is not leaving them in a comfort zone. It is the comfort zone that makes us live in illusion. When we step out of that comfort zone, either voluntarily or by force, then our illusions break. And we have no choice but to start looking at, okay, so what is going on? How do I survive this life? How am I going to manage? And then you start looking for some cause. It doesn't mean that you necessarily will find the right answers. For that, you have to find someone who can teach you as a guru or something like that, who can really help you. Then he says here, saintly persons think of God 24 hours a day. They have no other interest. Why should people neglect the association of such exalted spiritual personalities and try to associate with materialists, most of whom are non-devotees, proud and rich? So now we're coming back to these two boys. Narad then continued, these two boys are drunk and unable to control their senses because they have been blinded by the pride of celestial opulence. So they were in the what is called the heavenly planets. In the Vedic concept, neither heaven nor hell are permanent. Hell means a place of greater suffering, and heaven means a place of greater pleasure. But all of these are temporary. And ultimately, one has to come back to this earth, because this earth is the place from where you have an equal amount of pain and pleasure. And from here, you actually get the opportunity to begin to understand things as they are. You're not as bewildered by opulences of heavenly planets, and you're not so caught up in the suffering of some of the more hellish places. On this earth, we have places like that. There are places that people live in desert, which is really hellish. There's people who live in places where it's like polar weather. It's quite hellish. Right? And then there's people who live in places like California, where it's just perfect weather most of the time. So that's a heavenly place. But one must not be blinded by the pleasures of a heavenly place. And one must learn that life is not about sense enjoyment, but rather about performing austerities, which means doing difficult things that will advance the cause of your spiritual life. Then he continues, due to false prestige and madness after drinking liquor, they are naked but cannot understand that they are. Therefore, because they are living like trees, these two young men should receive the bodies of trees. This will be proper punishment. Once they are released from their tree bodies, by my mercy. So he adds within the punishment, he adds an element of mercy. By my mercy, they will remember their past sinful activities. After 100 years, by the measurement of the demigods, which is a lot longer than our human time, they will see the supreme Godhead, Vasudev, Krishna, face to face, and thus revive their real position as devotees of God. Having thus spoken, the great sage Narad returned to his home, his ashram known as Narayan Ashram, and the two boys, Nala Kuber and Manigriva, became the twin Arjun trees in Gokul, right in the home of Krishna. To fulfill the truthfulness of the words of his very dear and affectionate devotee, Narad, baby Krishna slowly crawled to the spot where the two twin trees were standing. And as he came face to face with them, he began to think of their deliverance. So what did he do? He was bound and tied up to this big, huge wooden mortar. He had dragged it along. He'd come between the trees and then entered through the trees, dragging the big mortar to which he was bound behind him. The mortar then got stuck between the trees. By dragging the wooden mortar with great force, baby Krishna uprooted the two trees. By his great strength, both the trees, with their trunks, leaves, and branches, trembled severely and fell to the ground with a great crash. Thereafter, in that very place where the two trees had fallen, two great personalities emerged from the trees, the effulgence of their beauty illuminating all directions. With bowed heads they offered obeisances to Krishna, and with hands folded they said, "O Sri Krishna, your opulent mysticism is inconceivable." So now they're talking to this baby here, and they know who he is. They've understood that. And you might say, well, how can the baby drag along that mortar, and how can he make two trees fall down? Well, he's the cause of all creation. He can do anything he likes. But he's doing this very secretly, without his mother looking. He doesn't want her to know what he's doing. So they say, these two boys, as they're released from that tree body that they were stuck in, they say, "O Sri Krishna, your opulent mysticism is inconceivable. You are the supreme original person, the cause of all causes, and you are beyond this material creation. You are the supreme Godhead, the controller of everything. You are the imperishable time factor. You are the original cause of this material manifestation, and you are seated in everyone's heart. Therefore, you know everything within the heart of every living entity. You exist before the creation. Therefore, how can someone who is trapped in a material body in this world understand you? You are everything and are therefore the supreme Brahman. Brahman is the energy that pervades the entire universe. So you are that energy. We offer our respectful obeisances unto you." So obeisances are offering respect. Appearing in bodies like those of an ordinary, so Krishna has appeared in many different incarnations, fish, tortoise, hog. You exhibit activities impossible for such creatures to perform. Extraordinary, incomparable, transcendental activities of unlimited power and strength. So if you heard the earlier episodes of the Bhagavatam, you would have heard these different incarnations, avatars. Then he says, "These bodies of yours, therefore, are not made of material elements, but are incarnations of your supreme personality. You have now appeared with full potency for the benefit of all living entities within this material world. We offer our obeisances to you, who are the supreme good. We are always your servants. Please give us permission to leave for our home. It is by the grace and mercy of Narad that we have been able to see you face to face. Henceforth, may all our words describe your pastimes. May our ears engage in hearing about your glories. May our hands, legs, and all other senses engage in actions pleasing to you. And may our minds always think of your lotus feet. May our heads offer respects to everything within this world, because all things are also your different forms, meaning everything in this world is actually different forms of God. And may our eyes see the forms of your devotees who are none different from you." At this point, Sri Krishna, baby Krishna, who is the master of all, was bound to the wooden mortar and was smiling. And he said, "The great sage Narad is very merciful. By his curse he showed you great favor. You were mad after material opulence and thus became blind. Although you fell from the higher planets and became trees, you were most favored by him. I knew of all these incidents from the very beginning. When one is face to face with the sun, there is no longer darkness for one's eyes. Similarly, when one is face to face with a sadhu, a highly evolved being, who is fully determined and surrendered to Supreme Godhead, one will no longer be subject to material bondage. You may return home, since your desire to be always absorbed in my devotional service and develop love and affection for me will be fulfilled. You will never fall from that platform." Means you'll never again go through this situation again. Don't have to worry. The two young boys, the demigods, they circumambulated baby Krishna, who went around him and offered obeisances to him and returned to their respective homes. When the trees fell, all the people in the neighborhood, hearing the sound, had come to that spot. There they saw the fallen trees on the ground, but they were bewildered because even though they could directly perceive that the trees had fallen, they could not trace out the cause for this incident. Krishna was bound by the rope to the mortar, which he was dragging. How could he have pulled down the trees? Who had actually done it? Considering all these astounding things, they were doubtful and bewildered. Then all the cowherd boys said, because the cowherd boys, they'd been watching Krishna, all the little boys of the town, they'd been watching. He said, it is Krishna who has done this. When he was in between the two trees, the mortar, the whole mortar fell crosswise, and then he dragged it and the two trees fell down. After that, two beautiful men came out of the trees. We have seen this with our own eyes. But because of intense parental affection, the villagers could not believe that Krishna could have uprooted the trees. Come on. You must be imagining things, they thought. Therefore, they did not put their faith in the words of the boys. Some of the men, however, were in doubt. Since Krishna was predicted to be equal to Narayan, the Supreme Being, they thought maybe he could have done it. But it's not possible. He's just a baby. Come on. And when Krishna's father, Nanda, saw his son bound with ropes to the wooden mortar, he smiled and released Krishna from his bonds. So, with that, we come to the end of today's narration, and I'd love to know your thoughts. What did you make of that? Is this impossible? Is this possible? Is it possible that that Supreme Being, God, could take form? Some people say, no, God cannot take a form. Why not, I ask? Why can he not take any form? And this is the only place where you will get that kind of detailed depiction of what the activities of God are. His pastimes, his Leela. And in those pastimes, all of it is designed to make us fall in love. There is only one objective, to make us fall in love with God. Why would he want us to fall in love with him? Because that's the relationship we share. We have always been lovers of God. And therefore every religion teaches that. To love God with all your heart, with all your mind, with all your soul. But how will you love someone you know nothing about? You may know philosophies, but you don't know what he looks like. You don't know what his name is. You don't know what he does. You don't know why you should fall in love. I mean, you can say, you love because he takes care of you and does things for you and he's provided this earth and this body and so on and so forth. But that still doesn't make you fall in love with someone. You might feel grateful. But here we're going way ahead of gratitude. We're going into love. And we're going into the highest love of all, the greatest love of all. That's the invitation here. And we'll be looking at various aspects of this love as we go along with the different narratives. We'll come across the love of his friends. We'll come across the love of the gopis, the girls, and how they fell. And we'll see how he grows up and becomes this charming, handsome, beautiful being that everyone's in love with. And we'll get to understand the nature of that divine love. So yeah, one more call out. Shout out to all of you. Any last words, any thoughts, any questions, please feel free to write them down. I'd be very happy to answer your questions, and all questions are welcome. There's a bunch of you there on Instagram, some of you there on YouTube, and some who've come on Zoom. Thank you all for being here. I really appreciate you. No questions? Are you sure? What do you make of this? What do you make of the idea of God as someone who can have these kind of pastimes and Leela? Is it mind-blowing, inconceivable? Do you have doubts? Do you have questions? Do you think this is possible, this is not possible? What? I'd love to know all that. If you're feeling awkward writing down something right now, or it's not coming to your mind yet, well, maybe later on. You can always come to the YouTube channel. Look for Spiritual Wisdom Academy. That's how I've named the channel now. And you'll find the video there, and feel free to write something, ask a question. I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to know what you think. All right. I'll see you next week. Same time, Tuesdays. This is 7 p.m. Pacific time, 10 p.m. Eastern time in the US. And for those of you who are in India, I know some of you are joining in from India. Thanks for being here, guys. And for you, it's Wednesdays at, I think it's 7:30. No. It'll be, gosh, why don't I remember this? I think it's 7:30 a.m. that we're on. So, all right. And if you want to be on the mailing list, just let me know. Go to my website, rohitjuneja.com, or you can go to, that'd be fine, rohitjuneja.com, and you can just, join the mailing list if you like from there. All right. Take care, and I will see you next week. Hare Krishna. Jai Shri Krishna. Hare Krishna.